Hey guys, so I figured a good place to start for this video series would be the recent controversy in DC over the Make America Great Again hat kit and the Native American protesters. So we'll start off by going over the three involved parties and what each of them were doing there. We'll start with the Native American protesters. They were there for what's called the Indigenous Peoples March, and I pulled a bit off their website here to kind of explain what they were doing there. Uh, on January 18th, 2019, we are uniting Indigenous peoples across the world to stand together to bring awareness to the injustices affecting Indigenous men, women, and children. Indigenous peoples from North and South America, Mexico, Canada, and the Caribbean are a target of genocide. Currently, more indigenous peoples are victims of voter suppression, divided families by walls and borders, environmental holocausts, sex and human trafficking, and police and military brutality with little or no reservation and awareness of this injustice. We must unite and help. So, it's a generally noble cause, and no ill will towards anyone there. They just want to bring some awareness to the fact that they are a suppressed people in their mind, and in the mind of others as well. They generally, at least here in North America, have definitely been victims of a lot of those things. Maybe not so much in recent years, but definitely throughout history. So the next group we'll get to are the Black Israelites. They were there to counter protest the the Indigenous Peoples March. They were claiming that the chosen people of Israel are the actual natives to the world, which historically, I mean, yes, that is true. The quote unquote black people are the genetically the first people. Life did originate in Africa, so that's at least sort of factual. But the way they were going about it was a little rude and obnoxious. But anyway, the third party involved were the high school kids from Kentucky, and they were there for the March for Lives, which is a pro-life rally. Which once again it's a cause that isn't necessarily a bad thing. You may have your personal opinions about it, but really all they're doing is they were there to march and say, hey, just don't kill babies, and in their mind that's what they were doing. So those are the parties involved. So next we'll go with the video. I don't know if you haven't seen it. There's a video that's about an hour and 45 minutes long that starts with the Israelis. They call themselves, I want to say Muslims, but they didn't identify themselves as Muslims. They identified themselves as Israelis. So to avoid mislabeling anyone, I'm just going to refer to them as Israelis throughout. So the Israelis were there, and they had a little stand set up. There was four of them, I believe, and they were there. And the video starts with a group of Native Americans coming and say, hey, what are you doing here? This is for, the native people of this land. And they respond in a very negative manner, just claiming that you aren't the natives of this land. We're the natives of this land and all lands because God told us so. And, most of the Native Americans, or indigenous peoples, brush this off, as, hubris, as it clearly was. But there were a few that, as humans tend to do, thought it would be fun to argue and, got into it. It got a little heated, and that was no big deal. That's what everyone was there for, spread awareness, get their point of view out. But about 5 minutes in, one of the Israelis, he all of a sudden says, he looks at the native person that he's arguing with and says something along the lines of, this isn't a direct quote, so I tried to get as many direct quotes as I could, but for the most part this is not word for word, but it's close enough. If you go through and check the video, I'm not changing too much what was said. It's just for lack of my memory, whatever. But At this point, one of the Israelis looked over at a group of the high school kids who, let me remind you, are like 16, 17-year-old teenagers. And he says to the native person, "Why are you mad at us? Why aren't you mad at these?" Let's see what he called them. I have it written down here. Sorry about this, guys. He says, "Why are you mad at us? You should be mad at these crackers with their Maga hats." Which, fine, whatever. Cracker's a racial slur, but I mean, I personally have never been offended by it, and I don't know that I've ever met many other white people that were offended by it. But that's not the point. It was, generally peaceful thing, and then he went out with the racial slurs, whatever. So from there's where it starts to go downhill, and it continues on this way. He'll argue with the natives, and then somebody in a "Make America Great Again" hat will come by and he'll insult them. I'd like to now go through a list of, and there's a lot of them, a list of the insults that this guy went through and called a lot of the people there throughout. So next thing he says, at one point he points over to the group of the high school kids. There's a group of mostly white kids. There were a few kids of color there. And he says, "Look at these little Billies and their little Kanye niggas." So apparently, I had a black friend who always called me a Billy, so I found that humorous when he said it. But once again, in the context he was using it, I could see how it could be construed as offensive. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is offensive, but he was, trying to use it in an offensive manner. And the way he used Kanye niggas, that's ridiculous to me, to kind of use that as an assault. Sure, he's an eccentric, but I mean, he's a millionaire. I mean, I imagine it's probably their new version of Uncle Tom. Who knows? I can't speak on that, but that's what I got out of it. Next on the list here we have, he called the Native Americans totem pole worshippers and told them that they will burn in hell because they worship the elements and not he who created them. Told them that's why you are drunkards who own casinos. Once again, owning casinos, probably not something that's bad. I mean, casinos generate money. They basically print the stuff. But, you can see there these people were, insulting. There was no reason to go as far as say, just because you don't believe in what we believe in, you're going to burn in hell, and that's why you're all alcoholics. Stereotyping the native people. Let's see what we got next. He then looked at the high school kids again and called them Peckerwoods and MAGA hats. Let me be real with you. I'd have wished for my entire life for someone to unironically call me a Peckerwood. That is the most preposterous thing you could call someone. Peckerwood just sounds silly, but once again, he was using it as hatefully. I don't have much more to say on that. Then the native people around this point started to say, like, what's your problem with these people? Sure, they're white, but they're not these people didn't oppress you. And he goes on to call them Uncle Tomahawks, which is a play on Uncle Tom, I'd imagine. Because they're Native Americans, and Native Americans use tomahawks. So I got a little chuckle out of that. But once again, as preposterous and ridiculous as some of these slurs he uses sound, they were still, there was malice behind them. So it's not okay. Just because I found them humorous doesn't mean that they are humorous. At one point, he begins randomly to spew, "Thou shalt not be a faggot, thou shalt not be a lesbian." So just for no reason begins, attacking the, for lack of a better term, LGBTQ plus community. And then at one point, this was I can see probably why he said it with recent things that were in the news, but it was still another just random attack on someone who wasn't involved in his dialogue. There was a priest standing in the back watching everything happen, and he just that man's a child molester. So I don't know if there's a way you can tell holy man's religion just by looking at them. He had the collar. I don't know if that automatically makes him Catholic, but he apparently thought that was the case. So that was also interesting. He then, after calling the priest a child molester, pointed back over to the high school kids and said, "That's America's religion, a bunch of faggot child molesters in MAGA hats." Back to the homosexual bashing, you know, back to now apparently all white people are child molesters. I, I can't say I agree with that, and I'd imagine most rational people wouldn't, but I'm not here to speculate on what everyone else thinks. Uh, this was one of the toughest parts to watch. In recent years, there's been quite a few school shootings, so that's probably a touchy subject if you're a high school kid. And he looks at the kids and tells them that they're a bunch of future school shooters, and then claims that there's never been a school shooting or mass shooting done by a person of color, which that's not the case. I could give at least 15. If that's something you're interested, let me know. I'm not going to go through it here, but it was a false claim. There's definitely been mass killings and mass shootings perpetuated by people of color, and it's not just a white issue. I'm sure I'd have to check, but probably more were done by white people, but to claim that only white people do it is just a falsehood. But, the kids obviously were affected by this because it's something that they, maybe not in their private school that they go to, have to deal with, but it's something that, is probably in a lot of high school kids' minds. Like, they do active shooter drills and stuff now. It's not like when we were in high school, so, like, it's something that's probably, if not constantly, at least maybe every now and then, on your mind. Once again, I'm not trying to speculate on things like that, but, I mean, it clearly, it visibly made the kids uncomfortable, and they all dispersed. They walked directly away from this man, and they went and stood on the steps of the monument, and it could have been the end of it. It wasn't. After those kids had left, there was I think he was Hispanic. If I'm mislabeling him, I apologize, but I think he was a Hispanic man who was on a little electric skateboarding around, and the guy holding the camera snapped, and he started saying things like, he says, "This guy gets too close, his ass is gonna get punished." Whatever. The guy was just riding around on a skateboard trying to defuse the situation, and he repeatedly threatened him with violence. He at one point picked up his staff, which is, funnily enough, a religious, for lack of a better word, artifact. That's not the correct word, but I think you know what I mean. And he says he's gonna hit him with it if he gets too close. And he just repeatedly throughout the video, this guy comes through trying to de-escalate. He's playing some music, dancing around on a skateboard, and this guy just, if he gets too close, I'm gonna knock him on his ass. There's gonna be blood on my staff today. Saying ridiculous things like that. There was no need for it, but I mean, once again, we're not dealing with rational people, it seems to me, but whatever. Let's see. At one point, he calls Jesus himself a faggot child molester, which is interesting because I've never seen evidence to support those claims, but whatever. He then goes on to say at this point they've made their way across the the big area. I don't know what it's called, but the grounds in front of the monument, and they're over by the stairs. Sounds like someone's getting arrested out there. Sorry, but they made their way over to the stairs back to where the high school kids were again, and he's in the middle of his rant. He says, "You think that we're the terrorists?" Referring to the people of Israel. He says, "But the biggest terrorists are the pale-faced men, women, and children." So I could see, if you were making the claim that America, the country, were terrorists, I could maybe, hear an argument for that. But to claim that all white men, women, and children are terrorists, children, yeah, I mean, by definition, could technically be considered terrorists, but not in the sense he meant. It's just another ridiculous claim that he made, whatever. And I think the last claim I have here, I believe, yeah, the last thing he said that was ridiculous was said that all Trump supporters and white people in general are babies made of incest, which is, well, that's just clearly not the case. I mean, if that were the case, our gene pool would be a lot worse than it is. I mean, I'm sure that that does happen, but once again, I'm not trying to speculate. So, that's those are the big insults and things that the people of Israel were saying. And before you think I'm just cherry picking all the bad things they said, I would like to say that there were a few times throughout that they did have like civil dialogue with a lot of the people there. They were discussing things and showing reference in their book, which I believe it was the Old Testament. So they would go through and show where they get these ideas, where they claimed there were points where there were civil discussion, but it very often and very erratically would just turn back to them speaking irrationalities and speaking hate for no reason. It was unnecessary. But like I said, they were also, it wasn't all that. They did at times have a few civil dialogues with a few people. So the next party I'd like to get to would be, we'll go with the Native Americans. So unfortunately, not most of this video, all of this video was taken from a perspective of one of the Israelis. So, you can't see everything that's going on outside of that circle. So, it's not like, obviously I wasn't there, so I didn't get to see everything with my own eyes. So, but I just wanted to make that clear before I get into the natives and the high schoolers, because I don't have much information about what was going on with them, because the longest video that takes place from before the big incident that was in the news to after it is from the perspective of one of these Israel people. So that's why I have probably a lot more information of what was said by them than anyone else. Now, so as I said, sorry, we'll go to the natives. At the beginning, they, some of them got aggressive with the Israeli people. I think people of Israel is probably the way to say that. I apologize. But at the beginning, they argue with them. Some of them have legitimate dialogue. But for the most part, they keep their distance. They do a little drum circle, which, is generally a pretty peaceful thing. I've been to a few drum circles myself, powwows, whatnot, and I've never seen that as an act of aggression. But that's just my personal opinion. Anyway, so that's basically what they were doing, and no, they weren't even a main focal point of the video, except at the beginning when they did their drum circle, and at the end, whenever the people of Israel began to attack the children again with their verbal assault. That's when, don't want to say his name because I don't want to say it wrong. Philip something, I believe. I apologize for that. But the man with the drum, he approaches, and it's clear that he was trying to de-escalate this situation between the white kids from Kentucky and the Israelites. People of Israel, sorry, I did it again. So that's basically all I got from what they were doing. Now we'll get to the real evil people here, the high school children. Sorry about that. At the beginning, it's the children are incredibly civil. As the people of Israel are spewing their hate speech at them, there's one point where one of the high school girls just screams back, "One world, one race, one love, one people." And he didn't address it. He brushed it off. Yeah, one people, the white people. That's what you want, the white people. That was like the only main interaction that they had up until they would be attacked. And at one point, a kid did take his shirt off, and I don't know, they did their school chant. It was a little strange, but when you're a high school kid being, well, even a group of high school kids, think back to high school, adults, they, at least to me, you were supposed to do what adults said, especially if you were at a school function like they were, like they're supposed to. Anyway, they reacted in a way that high school kids would react. They started being silly, and I wouldn't say, in my opinion, they didn't react in an appropriate way, but it certainly wasn't hateful. The only thing that I would say is hateful is at one point, he gets into the "When was America ever great?" This is one of the people of Israel. He says, "When was America ever great? The only time America was ever great was when we were slaves. Your people succeeded by the bloodshed of our people." And one kid, he yells, "Fuck yeah!" But that was the only overtly racist thing that happened, and he was chastised by many of his fellow students. Saying, "Oh, no, that's not okay. That's racist. You can't do that." So that's about it, honestly, until the drummer comes up and he gets in between the people of Israel and the high school kids, and then something interesting happens. In the news media claimed that the drummer was surrounded by these kids, and that did happen. But what appears to me happened is he got in between them, and a lot of these kids, went around him to get back to their original, dispute with the people of Israel. So it's not like they, came in or surrounded him in a hateful manner. They were just trying to get back to their original dispute. So the last thing I want to get into is some of the false claims that were made by the media. It was claimed that the high school kids started a Build the Wall chant. Now, there was a Build the Wall chant, but it wasn't started by the high school kids, oddly enough. It was started ironically by the people of Israel. He said, you with your dusty ass MAGA hat, build the wall, and him and his cronies began to chant "Build the Wall." But at no point in the video that I saw did the high school kids chant "Build the Wall." A few other false claims. Allegedly, they did the tomahawk chant, the whole Chiefs dealio. Oh, great, now I'm a racist. But, sorry. But, that's kind of a misrepresentation of what actually happened. What actually happened was they were doing a school chant, and in the school chant, they did that, but it was like both arms, and it would switch, like left, right. So, not really a racist tomahawk chant. They did do I believe the football team is the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm not a football fan. But the chant, oh, they did that. But once again, they weren't throwing the tomahawk. They were just chanting that. And the only time they did do anything that could be considered a racist chant was whenever the natives did come and, confront the kids. They were doing their own chant, and the kids joined in, silly kids being kids. And from my personal experience, I know I'm trying to keep away from that sort of thing in this, but from my personal experience, I've been to powwows. My ex-girlfriend was Native American. I've been to powwows, and at least at the ones I've been to, they encourage you to join in and to be a part of that, to feel what they call the Great Spirit move through you. So it certainly shouldn't be considered racist, and I don't think that's how they meant it. At worst, it was the kids reacting again to these adults chastising children, and in a way that they knew how to copy them and mock them. It was also claimed that the kids yelled, "Go back to your reservation." I didn't hear that at any point. That's not to say it didn't happen, but in the videos I've watched, I haven't heard it. And In closing, I'd like to say that even if the kids did do those things, they were just exercising the same First Amendment rights that, the native peoples and the people of Israel were doing. So I don't want to say anyone's to blame here. I mean, it's clear there were three parties involved. One, less than the other. They were there for a whole separate issue. The high school kids is what I'm speaking of, but they got roped into it accidentally, it seems, and it turned into a real shit show that the media seems to have misrepresented entirely. Big shocker there, I know, but this is the first time for me personally where I've been able to, go find clear video evidence of the media, misrepresenting what actually happened. And that's what really inspired me to start doing these, because I'd like to, from this point forward, go ahead and, find out what's actually going on. And, if I get, even if it's just a couple of you guys, are reliable, viewers, I'll keep it up. I'll keep checking out the news and seeing if I can't figure out what's really going on. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. That's all for this time. Hope to be back soon. All right, guys. Later.